be President of the United States, and that the Constitution deserves the respect that he's not giving it with respect to that issue. But at the same time, I think that I can imagine few things that would be more tragic for this country than any episode that involved a use of violence in any such way. And we've all got to pray earnestly and work hard to make sure that people are focused in terms of how we conduct ourselves in our disagreements on the things that, thank God, are still available to us to make the kind of difference that could rebuild liberty without putting America through terrible tragedies. And I've dedicated my life to this. And in a lot of ways, it's been thankless in some ways, I guess, because people think you always have to be concentrating on what power you get and so forth. And all I've tried to concentrate on is helping people to understand that we are dealing with issues that could lead us down such roads. And that since we don't want to go there, we need to be careful and serious and thoughtful beforehand. Don't wait till the crisis is right on top of you. Think it through beforehand. And there are things we're dealing with now, Stan, that if people had been willing to think about them and listen 10 and 15 years ago, we wouldn't be dealing with them today.
There's no doubt about that. Now, no one knows what tomorrow holds, much less the future. I mentioned this before, but let me run it by you. According to published reports, MI6, the British intelligence unit, has made it public that the King of Saudi Arabia has okayed the use of Saudi airspace for the Israelis if they were to attack Iran. We just saw, well, you always see with Ahmadinejad, but we just saw the latest edition. And then we had these revelations that weren't really revelations. They were known, but no one was making it public, about these secret installations. If you had to, guess, I guess is the best word, do you think, I don't see our president acting. Do you think Israel will act, or do you think that they will wait until Iran launches a nuclear weapon at them so they can respond to it?
Well, I think just from the point of view of simple, plain, clear realism, the Israelis cannot wait and will not wait until such a late date. At a time when, remember how small Israel is. A nuclear weapon going off in Israel, it will essentially produce a devastation on a national scale that would be the equivalent of what would happen to one of our major cities if one went off in terms of the devastation of that city. So, no. I don't believe that they can or will wait, and I think that's why Netanyahu has been making it very clear that they're not going to be able to sit on their hands and simply let this come to a head in a way that faces them with that ultimate eventuality. It's one of the reasons, sadly, why I think the policies that go down roads that are calculated, in fact, to mislead the Iranian leadership about the consequences of their ambitions is dangerous because you're actually hastening the likelihood that some such action is going to be required. Whereas if you make it clear that it is for prudential reasons. And here I want to be clear, Stan, that I'm not trying to make an argument that's based on some abstract principle, since I look at the world and I don't know, it doesn't seem to me that there's an abstract principle that says this nation gets to have nuclear weapons and that one doesn't. But there are issues of prudence, and when you have a regime like the Iranian regime that has been so regularly willing to promote the infrastructure of terror, to abuse with violence folks who are their adversaries, to rhetorically and in other ways encourage that kind of violence. The idea that people should look with equanimity upon the prospect that they are going to have these weapons of mass destruction, which they may either use themselves or feed into the infrastructure of terror with which they are so intimately familiar. Either eventuality is unacceptable from the point of view of the security of other nations, particularly those that Iran considers its adversaries in the world. And I don't believe that once hostilities have begun, and there is no doubt, sad to say, that after 9/11, hostilities began. And the Iranians have been very clear about their joy at a lot of those hostilities when they take the lives of Americans and others they consider to be sort of wicked and bad and evil, deserving of destruction. Well, once that situation of hostility, a state of war, if you like, exists, then one is authorized to take the steps that will most effectively prosecute one's needful defense in the course of that conflict. That's what the Israelis will have to do. And I frankly think it's what the United States of America ought to be doing, rather than getting on our knees and crawling about the world in an abject posture of apology while mouthing words about diplomacy that we don't back up with any effective infrastructure that could actually make use of force in such a way as to discourage aggressive actions against us or our people. This is a feckless policy. It makes no sense at all, except unless you want to hollow out America and set it up for destruction.
And many think that may be part and parcel. Let me ask you, nothing would do more to bring America down in the world's view, to cut away the confidence and pride of Americans, than to quote unquote lose in Afghanistan. And yet this president, when confronted by the very general he selected with the alternative, either give me the sufficient men and supplies, or we can lose, has opted to go off to Oslo and lobby for the Olympics at a time when men are dying.
Well, Stan, if I can step back for a minute, though, a part of me is uncomfortable accepting the consequences of bad policy and then arguing about, how bad they're going to be before we really look at what is actually the cause of the problem. The notion that somehow or another we have some critical, overwhelming big stake in the war in Afghanistan is a false notion. Afghanistan, like Iraq and some other places, is a front in a war that we have been engaged in since we were struck by terrorists on 9/11, even though it had an incipient quality that was going on before that. And as part of a strategic vision of how we prosecute that war in order to make sure that our people remain safe, that we disrupt the infrastructure of terror, that we interfere with their money, with their training cadre, and so forth and so on. Afghanistan had its place. What we were doing in Iraq had its place. Missions that we would undertake in other places, whether it's Indonesia, Sudan, Yemen, they all had their place, but as part of a strategic vision. If you let that vision collapse, which it has done certainly on account of the utter lack, either through willful malevolence or incompetence of the Obama faction as they have moved into these affairs, then what are you dealing with, Stan? You're dealing with sort of bits and pieces, flotsam and jetsam, and then you want to act like the whole world depends on them. Well, sad to say, our success or failure depends on the strategic vision that we're pursuing. When that strategic vision collapses, some form of failure is inevitable. It's simply going to happen because you're no longer prosecuting the war. And Obama declared that, war's over. Now, they haven't stopped trying to kill us, but the war's over. And when you declare that a war has ended before your enemy stops trying to kill you, what you're actually doing is surrendering to death. And sad to say, I say it again. Is this the result of incompetence, or is it the result of a malevolent will to see the destruction of America? And people will say, well, you don't think that's true. People, they're Americans just like you. You shouldn't say that about them. But come on, they have spent a good deal of their time, he confesses it, studying with people, looking at things, learning about things. Folks who express deep hatred of America, of our liberties, of capitalism, our economic way of life, who saw us as terrible perpetrators of injustice inherently economically, of racist thises and that's all over the place. I mean, this is somebody whose understanding of the world had America cast as villain. So the idea that such a person might want to visit retribution on the United States of America when he got a chance to do it, I don't know, strikes me as kind of logical. when you look at that background. You've at least got